Didn't you apologize to the crowd at Comic-Con for Batman and Robin? I always apologize for Batman.
Destroyed the franchise.
Felt like I was making a toy commercial.
I really want to apologize.
An extravagant and tasteless bore. I saw plenty of walkouts at the public screening I attended, and I would have been there with them.
The worst Batman ever.
It's not good, is it?
One of the worst films of all time.
All right, everyone, chill.
1997's Batman and Robin was cheesy, stiff, painfully over the top, and a huge disappointment for Warner Brothers. The studio canceled their Batman sequels and spent the next 6 years rejecting pitch after pitch to bring the character back. After Batman and Robin, the hero felt dated and out of touch. The studio was convinced that Batman was too campy and unrealistic for 21st century audiences.
Never leave the cave without it.
Other classic franchises faced the same problem, looking silly next to their more modern counterparts. If Hollywood's most beloved franchises were going to survive, they needed to be reborn, rebooted. Up-and-coming director Christopher Nolan approached Warner Bros. In 2003 with a new idea for Batman.
The franchise was broken. I think it was because of that Warner Brothers was willing to try something, in their opinion, more extreme, which is ironic because extreme meant just really taking it seriously.
That's David S. Goyer, who co-wrote Batman Begins along with Nolan. They placed Batman in a darker, more realistic world than a comic book fantasy.
When I started working on Batman Begins, the idea of doing something grounded was pretty baked into the concept. First of all, Chris tends to be a very grounded filmmaker.
The Dark Knight faces a criminal underworld, gang violence, and even terrorism. The last time the world had seen Batman, their ticket got them 2 hours of ice skating, puns, and action sequences that were designed to sell toys. You can imagine just how incredible it was to see this in 2005. For the first time, audiences saw a Batman who looked like he belonged in our world, and faced dangers that felt almost too real. Needless to say, Batman Begins was a massive success. To critics and general audiences, the movie's dark and gritty tone felt like a breath of fresh air. Warner Bros. Went ahead with 2 more movies that promised more of Christian Bale's grounded Batman that had audiences so hooked. David S. Goyer and Christopher Nolan didn't invent the reboot with Batman Begins, but their success meant that studios wanted to apply the same formula to their franchises.
I remember after Batman Begins, I was invited to various studios to see if we could do the Batman Begins or the Dark Knight version of various other franchises. I remember at one point Paramount wanted me to do the Dark Knight version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or everything was the Dark Knight version of this or the Batman Begins version of that.
A reboot allowed them to tell a story that felt fresh and new without the risk of actually creating an original work. There's the built-in fan base and cultural understanding of yesterday.
I do believe it's that arch criminal, the Joker.
But the tone and imagery of the modern era. Batman Begins was also a huge step in the continuing trend of legitimizing nerdy comic book movies as serious blockbusters. Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, stated, "Christopher Nolan's Batman is the greatest thing that happened to superhero films because it bolstered everything." In the wake of Batman Begins, a few other franchises decided to start fresh with a darker, grittier reboot. Let me see if I can think of 1 or 2 off the top of my head. Star Trek, James Bond, Robin Hood, Karate Kid, Race to Witch Mountain, Godzilla, Tron, Superman, the Wizard of Oz, the Lone Ranger, Power Rangers, Hercules again, Turtles, Fairy Tales, Fresh Battle 20 years later, the reboot doesn't pack the same punch. So, what happened to the dark and gritty era? And what's coming next? First, let's figure out how this trope was so effective for so long, or how any filmmaking style can connect with the audience so much that it captures an era. Gold Diggers of 1933 is a musical that came out in, 1933, at the height of the Great Depression. In the musical within the musical, the characters sing about money and dance in elaborate gold costumes in front of a giant quarter. Then the bankers come in and shut down the production because they don't have enough money.
You can't do this to me just because I don't pay a few bills. When the show opens, I will pay them. Tell it to the sheriff.
What's the excitement? It means they close the show, Dumbbell.
Gold Diggers of 1933 ended up being one of the most successful movies of the year, and Warner Bros. Most profitable. Those Great Depression audiences really connected with the way the movie grappled with financial insecurity, yet also provided escapism from it. Film scholar Richard Dyer saw this connection in Gold Diggers of 1933 and other classic musicals, and wrote his theory of entertainment and utopia. Dyer claims that while entertainment is responding to needs that are real, It offers the image of something better to escape into. So what real-world issues did the dark and gritty reboot grapple with? And how did they offer an escape?
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward. And freedom will be defended.
The tragic morning in September of 2001 changed everything, including how the world watched movies. Audiences were paranoid. So in dark and gritty reboots, well-established villains are usually adjusted from their previous iterations. They commit very visual violence against big groups of people. So gangsters, wrestlers, and fascist disco dictators became terrorists, and fascist grunge terrorists. And these interpretations of villains often worked. In a post-2001 world, they lined right up with audience anxieties. The images on the news and the big screen didn't look all that different from each other. But movies are an escape for the audience. Where real-world situations rely on flawed systems and may never get solved, movies can give us a hero who solves everything. They often learn that they can't trust the system to save people, but the audience can rely on them to make everything right again. And before the credits roll, those terrorist villains are either behind bars or 6 feet underground. On top of the whole terrorism and paranoia thing, the dark and gritty movement was a way to make stories feel more important and meaningful. This new generation of films took franchises that were seen as nerdy and childish, and put an adult spin on them.
There's no going back. You've changed things. Forever.
So every new reboot has to be darker and more serious. They have to say something about society.
Human will not forgive. Freedom is the right of all sentient beings.
Now we come here not as conquerors, but as liberators to return control of this city to the people.
So we've got grounded heroes, movies as a way of processing real-world anxieties, taking classic stories more seriously. What's the issue exactly? The success of this era meant that the dark and gritty brush started getting applied to every franchise. Take a look. I graphed out every darker reboot, adaptation, or sequel since 2005. You can see the era start with just a handful a year after Batman Begins, to when the trend took over Hollywood for almost a decade. The darkest, grittiest, rebootiest year of them all was 2014, which saw edgy installments of Transformers, Spider-Man, and Captain America, plus darker reboots or adaptations of Sleeping Beauty, Planet of the Apes, Godzilla, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Into the Woods, Dracula, 2 sexy edgy Hercules, and even Noah. From the Bible, that's 12 dark and gritty installments of existing stories in a single year. And over the last 20 years, we've had 102 by my count. And they weren't all as good as The Dark Knight.
Wanna know how I got these scars? Well, I'm the Joker, baby!
Not every franchise needed to come back edgier. The first ones were timely, refreshing, and tapped into the paranoia of the early 2000s. But edgy Battleship? Gray and serious Fantastic Four? Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson trying to stop a giant crocodile from doing another 9/11 based on the classic Atari game Rampage? What are we doing here? The source material doesn't always fit the tone. Regardless of how you feel about all these movies, you can see why a dark and brooding Batman makes more sense than a dark and brooding Superman or the Powerpuff Girls. More than that, the content might look dark, but it's not always tackling real problems.
Where's Batman?
Sometimes the gritty reboot thinks it's being more mature, but it's really just edgy for no reason. Every movie felt so caught up in reminding viewers that heroes aren't just for kids that it's easy to forget they ever were. My generation doesn't remember a time when popular movies weren't dark and gritty. Every hyped and anticipated movie in my childhood was marketed as being more mature, more adult, and taking it to another level. Even though the trend helped people confront their real anxieties and fears, there's only so much paranoia you can take. Years upon years of popular media reminding us that something bad could happen at any time is just exhausting. Sure, the world is a difficult and scary place, but not every character needs to be a brooding sad boy. The early Marvel Cinematic Universe movies belong firmly in the dark and gritty category. Before Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America were blockbuster movies, they were B-list cartoon heroes, never taken as seriously as the Spider-Mans and the Batmans of the world. The MCU grounded and legitimized them, going along with the wider dark and gritty trend, but there was something a little different and refreshing about these movies. Iron Man especially had a quippy snark, showing that he never took the dark circumstances all that seriously. Instead of constantly saying,
I'm whatever Gotham needs me to be.
He said things like,
Go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep.
I'm sorry.
So sure, our heroes fight terrorists. They need to defend New York from attackers. Sure, they can't trust American institutions to do the right thing anymore. But now, they can also crack a joke. And as the franchise went on, even the serious characters were constantly quipping, and the movies got a lot less grounded. Terrorists and government overreach gave way to talking raccoons, magic stones, and multiverse hopping. Whether it worked, or it didn't.
Look out!
Bruce.
Damn!
Or it really didn't, Marvel was zigging when everyone else was zagging. And while other franchises did try to replicate the MCU's more comic book style.
Oh, awesome. As a bat signal, that's your... Oh, sorry. That's your signal. That means we have to go now.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they kept one foot safely in the dark and gritty camp, too. Sarcastic and quirky never replaced the style it came from, and it seems like that era of movie is already behind us. Even during Marvel's most dominant run in the 2010s, grounded and dark reboots were still popping up every day. Yes, the world is still working through the paranoia that kicked off the 21st century, but Americans aren't as concerned with terrorism as they were in 2005. And nerd culture is now mainstream culture. Superhero and science fiction franchises don't have to promise to be extra mature and edgy to be taken seriously. Movie studios can't lean on dark and gritty reboots to refresh their IP anymore. It's not the winning formula it once was. In recent years, way fewer reboots, adaptations, and sequels hit the gritty, as the kids say. The most recent dark and gritty adaptation, as far as I know, was 2024's Kraven the Hunter. Did you see that? Neither did I. So how will studios adapt? If you think it's time for more original stories instead of rebooting franchises and changing the tone, you're not alone. But while there are less reboots in the 2020s than the 2010s, I don't think studios are ready to give up on them.
Left to their own devices, Hollywood is always going to just repeat and repeat and repeat until the audience gets sick of it.
With $100 million blockbusters, the reboot and sequel train is way less risky than creating something new. A reboot comes with built-in hype, a fan base, and attention that's hard to earn with an original story. So we're going to have Gen Z Superman, whether we want it or not, but something is bound to change. Sure, audiences don't want dark and gritty, but it's not entirely clear what they do want. So let's go back to Richard Dyer's utopian theory. While entertainment is responding to needs that are real, it offers the image of something better to escape into. What real-world issues would the next big trend grapple with? And how can stories offer an escape? I'm glad you asked. Right now, we're living in a world of constant noise. A million channels of conflicting information are all shouting at once. It's hard to even tell where the real problem is, let alone how to fix it. That overwhelm might inspire stories where the hero is someone who cuts through the chaos, sees the bigger picture, and finds a clean, focused solution. A narrative where all the threats are secretly connected, and one brave person untangles them, giving us the simple clarity we crave. Or maybe the next villains won't be so abstract. If another global recession makes wealth inequality the popular issue of the day, the real enemies might be the rich, the powerful, the out-of-touch elite. We could see a resurgence of stories about the common person rising up against unchecked greed and corruption. And a generation dealing with a housing crisis and endless inflation would connect with the hero who's dealt a crappy hand, but make something of it anyway. Then there's the influence of AI and social media. Maybe the heroes of tomorrow will be people who resist dehumanizing systems and fight back against malicious algorithms. Stories will reaffirm the value of face-to-face interaction, vulnerability, and empathy. In a culture where outrage drives engagement and algorithms amplify the loudest, most toxic voices, audiences might be hungry for a hero who turns this upside down. A hero who wins not by fighting fire with fire, but by staying human in a world that rewards cruelty. Whatever issues popular media focuses on, and whatever escape or utopian solution gets presented, I expect that the tone of these movies will feel very different from dark and gritty.
After having seen a ton of these really dark movies, sometimes it's nice to go back again and see something that's really joyous or something that isn't dark.
I think we may see bright and hopeful become the dominant trend. Take the most anticipated movie of 2025, James Gunn's Superman reboot. We jump right into a big universe full of wacky established heroes, super dogs, retro-futurist super robots. It doesn't feel dark and gritty, and it's certainly not grounded. The upcoming Fantastic Four reboot might fit in this category too. The trailer and marketing show off this bright, retro-futurist tone that makes it very clear that this is completely different from the last iteration of the franchise. The Harry Potter reboot is another big one coming soon. And I wouldn't be surprised if this iteration leans more into the childlike wonder and whimsy that fell by the wayside in the late 2000s. Other major franchises like Star Wars and Spider-Man are being soft rebooted in the next few years, and I'd guess the tones of those movies may look similar, brighter, cleaner, closer to the original source material. While the bright and hopeful tone feels like it could work for these franchises, like any trend, it might be applied to stories where it doesn't belong. Eventually, we'll probably see a hard reset on franchises like Jurassic Park and Fast and Furious. A bright and hopeful interpretation of those would be so cheesy they might just kill the trend then and there. But I'm calling it right now. Escapism for the next generation looks less like Gotham at night and more like Metropolis in the bright of day. Whatever storytelling looks like for the next 20 years, I'll make sure to make a holographic video essay in 2045 and we can go over what we liked and what we didn't. If you want to catch that one, make sure you subscribe.